On the day I was diagnosed with a pregnancy pulse, the maidservant who had accompanied me as part of my dowry climbed into Chui Song's bed. Chui Song claimed that the maidservant had taken advantage of him while he was drunk, disguised herself as me, and intentionally seduced him. I immediately expelled the maidservant from the estate. 7 months later, I went into labor and faced a difficult childbirth. Chui Song refused to call a doctor, watching helplessly as my baby died in my womb, taking both our lives. After you expelled her from the mansion, Bai Ling suffered unimaginable humiliation. When I found her, she had already died by the roadside. He covered my mouth and nose. Gritting his teeth, Jiang Zhitong, you killed her. You must pay with your life. Only then did I realize that Chui Song had already developed feelings for my maid and married me solely for my status as the legitimate daughter of a marquis mansion. After my death, Chui Song wept bitterly, arranged my funeral with great pomp and ceremony, and swore never to remarry. Everyone said he loved me deeply. Even my father believed it. Thus, my father helped him rise swiftly through the ranks, granting him the title of Minister of State. Yet he secretly colluded with rebel forces, opened the city gates during battle, and supported the rebel leader in proclaiming himself emperor. He then personally slaughtered the entire Jiang family, exhumed my corpse, and threw my bones to wild dogs to gnaw on. Filled with hatred, I returned to the Marquis's mansion on the day Chui Songlai came to propose marriage. Thank you for watching. Your support keeps these stories coming. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more captivating tales. What story should we tell next? Let us know below. Chapter 1. The tragic scene of the 37 heads of the Jiang family falling to the ground was still fresh in my mind when I suddenly heard the voice of the maid Bai Ling. Mr. Chui has passed the imperial examination as the top scholar and has come to your mansion to propose marriage. I slowly put on my earrings and pinned up my hair, saying nothing. Seeing that I didn't respond, Bai Ling grew anxious and hurriedly asked, Miss, don't you find Chui Gongzi charming? How can you remain so indifferent upon hearing he's come to propose marriage? I looked at Bai Ling's delicate features in the bronze mirror and asked indifferently, charming? Why should I find him charming? Bai Ling's face instantly flushed red. Chui Song is extremely handsome, of good character, knowledgeable, and has a bright future. He is the best husband one could ask for. Afraid that I wouldn't approve of Chui Song, she thought for a moment and continued to persuade me. Chui Song's parents are deceased, so if you marry him, you won't have a mother-in-law to restrict you, and you'll be able to live a more relaxed life. Isn't that good? Just then, a servant came to report that my father was summoning me to the study to discuss matters. I knew my father was calling me to meet Chui Song. Bai Ling accompanied me. Along the way, she praised Chui Song endlessly, extolling him as the finest man in the world. I stopped in my tracks, giving Bai Ling a mocking glance. If Chui Song is so wonderful, why don't you marry him instead? Bai Ling was taken aback. Then her face lit up with joy, and she blurted out, Can I? In the study, I saw Chui Song. He was wearing a blue robe that had been washed until it was almost white, standing tall and graceful, smiling as he bowed to me. Greetings, Miss Jiang. My blood froze in an instant. I gripped the table tightly, biting my lip to suppress the urge to splash the hot tea on his face. The Chui and Jiang families had been on good terms in the past, with an agreement that if their descendants were a son and a daughter, they would marry. Later, my family moved to the capital, and these casual words were never mentioned again. However, when Chui Song came to the capital to take the imperial examinations, he stayed at our home for a short while, citing our old friendship, and mentioned the agreement from years past. My father paused for a moment. Dear nephew, our Jiang family has a strict rule: male heirs or sons-in-law must be over 40 and childless before they may take a concubine. Can you do that? Chui Song didn't hesitate and immediately replied, I have long admired Miss Jiang. If Miss Jiang is willing to marry me, I will never take a concubine. My father's expression softened slightly. But I knew that these were just empty words from Chui Song. Chui Song doesn't love me, he loves Bai Ling. Bai Ling was once his personal maid. But after the Chui family fell on hard times, she was sold off. After many twists and turns, Bai Ling ended up in a marquis's mansion. In my previous life, Bai Ling would often mention Chui Song in front of me, either intentionally or unintentionally, and even helped me find his poems and calligraphy, gradually leading me to accept Chui Song and agree to this marriage. After the marriage, we appeared to be affectionate on the surface. But soon I was diagnosed with a pregnancy. I wanted to share this good news with Chui Song. But when I opened the door, I saw him and Bai Ling in a compromising position in broad daylight. Chui Song was drenched in sweat, and Bai Ling's red mandarin duck-shaped belly band was still hanging from his waist. Upon seeing me, Chui Song was startled for a moment, then fell off the bed, claiming he had been drinking and that Bai Ling had disguised herself as me to seduce him. Bai Ling also knelt and begged for forgiveness. The master truly mistook me for the young lady. All the names he called were the young ladies. It's all my fault. Please punish me. Young lady. I scolded Chui Song harshly and drove Bai Ling out of the mansion. I thought the matter was settled. But little did I know that this incident would cost me my life. On the day I was about to give birth, the pain was unbearable, so I asked Chui Song to quickly fetch the midwife my mother had prepared. Chui Song, however, closed all the doors and windows, sealed my mouth with adhesive tape, and sat by my bedside. Jiang Zhitong, Bai Ling is dead. Do you know that? His expression was dark, staring at the large bloodstains on the bedding. His eyes flickering with madness. It's all your fault. If you hadn't driven her out of the mansion, how could she have starved to death on the streets? We were both so careful. We managed to hide it from you so many times before. Why did you happen to catch us that one time? When he reached the most furious part, he twisted my neck with a hideous expression. Why did you diagnose her with a pulse of pregnancy? I should have given you musk to make you infertile. He choked me until my face turned red, and I died in his hands along with the fetus in my womb. Perhaps because of my deep resentment, my soul did not dissipate after death. I saw the day of my funeral. Chui Song wept so bitterly he nearly fainted, swearing before my father that he would never remarry. Everyone praised him as a man of deep love, and my father was deeply moved, supporting him in his rise to power. Later, a rebellion broke out in the south, and my father was ordered to suppress it. However, he colluded with the rebels, leaked military intelligence, opened the city gates, and allowed the rebels to enter the city, crowning their leader as emperor. To show his loyalty to the new emperor, he personally supervised the execution, broke my father's 5 fingers, and cut off the heads of 37 members of the Jiang family. He even ordered that my body be dug up and my bones thrown to the wild dogs to gnaw on. He said with righteous indignation, I, Chui Song, am willing to sacrifice my family for the greater good and serve the emperor. As a result, he became prime minister, while my entire family was buried underground, weeping in grief. At that moment, my father had Chui Song sent away. Turning to me, he spoke gently. Ah Ji, I see that Chui Song is a man of fine appearance and has some literary talent. You two are still betrothed. Why not marry him to him? Would that be acceptable? The room was filled with the scent of incense, and my father looked at me expectantly. I shook my head firmly and told him, I will not marry him. My father was taken aback, furrowing his brows. Are you looking down on the Chui family for being of lower status and unwilling to marry below your station? Ah Ji, marrying below one's station isn't necessarily worse than marrying above it. If you marry Chui Song, you won't have to serve your in-laws. and you'll be in charge of all matters in the mansion. You'll also be able to visit me and your mother often. Isn't that better?" I wanted to tell my father about my past life, but he had always despised tales of the supernatural and might send me to the clinic immediately upon hearing it. After thinking it over, I told my father, "Chui Song isn't interested in me, he's interested in my maid, Bai Ling." Bai Ling used to be Chui Song's personal maid, and the two have long harbored feelings for each other. My father was furious when he heard this. How dare he deceive me? I gave him a win-win solution. "Father, why don't you go with the flow? Take Bai Ling as your adopted daughter, and marry her to Chui Song. This would fulfill your old promise and prevent others from saying that the Marquis's mansion does not keep its word." After some consideration, my father agreed to the arrangement, and Bai Ling was so overjoyed that she kept thanking him. That night, she sneaked out of the mansion with a joyful expression. But when she returned, tears were streaming down her face. I knew she had gone to see Chui Song. I also knew that Chui Song, upon learning of this, was not only unhappy but furious. He didn't truly love Bai Ling as much as he claimed. If he truly loved her, he wouldn't have sold her off in the first place. Nor would he have married me. And after discovering our affair, he wouldn't have shifted all the blame onto Bai Ling, allowing me to expel her from the mansion. True love was just a pretext. Chui Song only loved himself. He wanted to marry me because he hoped my father could assist him in his political career. But after marrying Bai Ling, how could my father possibly support him? After returning home, Bai Ling would secretly glance at me and casually ask, "Miss, will you be going to the Tianzi Pavilion at the Linen Pavilion as usual to try the new tea snacks?" I was arranging flowers and replied absent-mindedly, "Yes." "Why?" "I'll prepare your clothes for you in advance." She seemed particularly enthusiastic. The next day, not long after I arrived at Linen Tower, Bai Ling suddenly ran down the stairs in a panic. She ran to the shopkeeper, her eyes red, and said in a loud voice, "I am a maid in the Marquis of Yongbing's mansion. My mistress went to the Emperor's pavilion today and asked me to go to the street ahead to buy some fruit for her. I brought the fruits back, but the door to the inner chamber was locked tight. No matter how much I knocked, the young lady wouldn't open the door. The restaurant was crowded with people, and after hearing this, they all looked at her curiously. She lowered her voice, but it was still loud enough for everyone to hear. I also heard a man's muffled groans coming from the room. I'm afraid something has happened to my mistress. So please help me open the door. If you can save her, the Marquis of Yongping will reward you handsomely." There was an uproar, and people began to whisper among themselves. Could it be a secret rendezvous with her lover? How could the daughter of the Marquis of Yongping be so immoral? The innkeeper hesitated for a moment, afraid that something might happen in the restaurant, but finally took the spare key and slowly went up to the private room on the second floor. The crowd below rushed forward, curious to follow him and see what was happening. The door to the private room was opened. Inside, a man and a woman were clinging tightly to each other, their faces flushed with an abnormal redness. The scene was so filthy and disgusting that it was unbearable to look at. Bai Ling immediately rushed in crying, "Miss, you are being foolish. Although you are engaged to the newly crowned top scholar, Mr. Chui, how can you commit adultery before you are married?" Her face was wet with tears, and she stamped her feet in distress. "How am I going to explain this to the Marquis?" She repeatedly reminded everyone that the daughter of the Marquis of Yongping and Chui Song were secretly in love and wanted to tie me and Chui Song together. But how could I do as she wished? As the onlookers whispered among themselves, I leaned leisurely against the doorframe of the second floor's gable pavilion and asked her coldly, "Bai Ling, what nonsense are you talking about? Aren't I here?" Bai Ling stared at me in disbelief, her eyes wide. "Miss, you. How did you get here?" "I heard the view from the gable pavilion is nice, so I decided to switch rooms today." I looked over at the side room. Take a good look at that woman. Don't slander me. Bai Ling staggered and muttered. Yes. Miss. You're over there. Then. Who is that woman in Chui Gongzi's arms? Upon hearing this, everyone's gaze focused on the woman in the side room. Many of the men present gasped in shock. They all recognized her, Yunu, the most famous and promiscuous prostitute in Yichuan courtyard. With so many people watching, Chui Song and Yunu seemed oblivious and continued to kiss passionately. Bai Ling came to her senses, gritted her teeth, rushed into the room, and made a move to close the door. This is someone else's private business. What are you looking at? Bai Ling, what does Chui Song's business have to do with you? Who are you to interfere? I raised my voice and shouted at her. What are you running in there for? Come back quickly. Bai Ling hesitated for a moment, her face flushing red, before finally stamping her feet and slamming the door shut with a loud bang. Sounds of struggling came from inside. Judging by the shadows on the window paper, Bai Ling was probably trying to separate the two. But I had specially invited the alluring Yunu to come, and had asked her for the strongest aphrodisiac from the Yichuan courtyard. I had lit incense in the Tianzi pavilion long ago. At this moment, Chui Song was in the heat of passion, having lost all reason. How could he possibly listen to Bai Ling? Bai Ling was roughly pushed to the ground, tears welling up in her eyes as she cried out to him, Chui Song, how could you do this to me? The incense burned in the stove, and she gradually lost her mind, making sounds that made people think dirty thoughts. Yunu clapped her hands and laughed coquettishly. Oh, the top scholar is so fierce. He wants to enjoy the pleasures of both men and women. The second-floor corridor was crowded with people who were stunned by what they heard and whispered about Chui Song. The top scholar is actually consorting with a courtesan. He's even fighting with a maid from the Marquis of Yongbing's mansion. How scandalous! A courtesan on his left and a maid on his right. What will people say? Rumors spread quickly in the capital. Within 3 days, everyone would know what happened at the linen pavilion. Chui Song's reputation was completely ruined. Not only would he never have a successful career, he might not even be able to get a government position. Everyone. I cleared my throat and said solemnly. Everyone saw it. My maid was plotting against her master and acting outrageously. The Marquis of Yongbing's mansion has been a model of integrity for generations, with clear rewards and punishments. We cannot tolerate such an unruly maid insulting our family. I had my servant drag Bai Ling out of the linen tower and back to the Marquis's mansion. Bai Ling's eyes were a little clearer, and she knelt in front of me with her hair disheveled, red marks on her neck, desperately trying to argue her case. Miss, I just thought that Mr. Chui was a good match for you, and I didn't want you to miss out on him. You didn't want me to miss out. So you ruined my purity and tarnished my reputation? I lifted her chin and laughed coldly. Do you know what this is called? It's called betraying your master. I called everyone in the courtyard and ordered the servant to bring the torture instruments. She was beaten with a rod 30 times. Bai Ling's screams filled the air. By the 15th stroke, her lower body was a bloody mess, and she was on the verge of fainting. Just then, my mother suddenly stepped forward and ordered the servants carrying out the punishment. Stop! The servants dared not disobey my mother's orders and immediately stopped. I thought my mother didn't know about today's events, so I told her everything that had happened at the linen pavilion. Gee, I already know about this. That girl Bai Ling betrayed us and tried to harm you. She truly deserves punishment. She then looked at Bai Ling, who was half covered in blood, her eyes red with anger. But gee, how can she endure 30 lashes? You're sending her to her death. I crossed my arms and glared at Bai Ling, speaking calmly, then let her die. How can you be so ruthless? My mother furrowed her brows and urged me. Show mercy where you can. If the maid is no good, we can expel her from the estate. Why kill her and bring misfortune upon ourselves? Stop at once. Quickly summon a physician to treat her. Bai Ling was still conscious and struggled to say, "Thank you, madam." Mother, have you ever heard the saying, if you don't uproot the grass, it will grow again in the spring breeze? I rubbed my temples and said solemnly, today she dared to ruin my reputation. And with all the resentment in her heart, who knows what she might do tomorrow? So, just kill her outright. I raised my chin and ordered the servant to continue. Your father is a general, so you have a violent disposition. I have been a vegetarian and prayed to Buddha for so many years to help the Marquis' mansion eliminate killing karma. But you have taken after your father. My mother was furious and stopped the servant. No one is allowed to touch her. The servant looked at me helplessly. I rolled up my sleeves and picked up the wooden board myself to strike Bai Ling. I grew up in the desolate north. Raised as a boy. I read military manuals. Trained in martial arts. And was skilled with swords, spears, and halberds. Holding a wooden board was no challenge for me. Just as my board was about to strike Bai Ling, my mother suddenly lunged forward, shouting angrily, "If you want to hit her, hit me first." The servants in the mansion fell silent, and even I was taken aback. I knew my mother was kind-hearted, but she wouldn't go this far over a maid. Would she? The farce ended with me throwing the bloodied Bai Ling out of the mansion. My mother was furious and scolded me for having a heart of a snake and a scorpion. I suddenly recalled a scene from my previous life that I had neglected. At that time, my mother had just returned from visiting our hometown in Jinling with my father. The next day, she came to the Chui mansion to see me. Seeing that Bai Ling was not by my side to attend to me, my mother asked about the reason. Upon learning that I had expelled Bai Ling from the mansion, my mother did not grow angry over her sordid affair with Chui Song. Instead, she grew visibly anxious. I asked her, "Mother, what's wrong?" She snapped back to her senses. Placing her hand on my 7-month swollen belly, "Mother is simply worried about your childbirth." Yet from that day onward, my mother never once visited the Chui mansion to see me. On the day of my funeral, my mother stood behind my coffin, head bowed, her face. Not a single tear fell. A cold breeze swept across the ground, and I wrapped myself tighter in my cloak, suddenly feeling a chill run down my spine. Before my father returned to the mansion, he had already heard about the incident at the linen pavilion from his colleagues. He was visibly shaken. "Ah, Ji. Thank goodness we didn't marry you off to Chui Song. Who would have thought he was such a hypocrite? And that Bai Ling? She seemed like a clever maid. But she was so confused. She should have her tongue cut out and be hanged." He sighed softly and held my hand. "Your father knows all your grievances. But your mother is kind-hearted and does not want bloodshed. Do not hold a grudge against her." I didn't answer, looking at my father's pale face and asking him softly, "Father, did you encounter any difficulties in the imperial court?" "It's nothing serious." My father shook his head and laughed bitterly. "The emperor is lustful, and the ministers are all waiting outside the hall. But he refuses to attend court. When he finally appeared today, it was already past noon. A few days ago, the emperor took a fancy to the daughter of Su Hanlin. The girl was already engaged to her beloved, but the emperor disregarded that and summoned her to the palace. He frowned, seeming quite dissatisfied. I squatted down, looked up at him, and asked in a low voice, "Father, since the emperor is so debauched and tyrannical, have you ever thought of taking his place?" My father heard this, paused for a moment, then his expression darkened. "Jiang Zhiding, do you know what you're saying?" I met his gaze and repeated, "The Great Yin dynasty is already in decline." "Father, don't you want to?" "Shut up." He withdrew the kindness he had shown upon seeing me, slammed his hand on the armrest, and shouted in a deep voice, "Put away those treasonous thoughts. Don't even dare to think about such things. Your father is a subject of the emperor. All I desire in this life is to be a loyal general or a faithful minister." I wasn't at all surprised by my father's reaction. He had always been utterly loyal. Even with a large army at his disposal, he had never once considered overthrowing the great Yin dynasty. However, under the emperor's rule, floods have ravaged the south, and the north has suffered crop failures, leaving the people in dire straits. Ultimately, someone must establish a new dynasty to restore peace to the realm. Though my father rejects my words, they will be etched into his mind. Every time the emperor acts tyrannically, he will unconsciously recall these words. Moreover, even a cornered rabbit will bite, and my father has simply not yet reached a dead end. 3 days later, I donned a lotus-pink gown and headed toward the northwest of the capital to the Shan garden as dusk fell. When he saw me passing by, he called my name, Jiang Ziding. It was Cui Song. I heard that the emperor had awarded official positions to the top 3 scholars today. The runner-up entered the Hanlin Academy. The third-place scholar went to the Ministry of Works. And Cui Song, the top scholar, was actually called to be in charge of the Imperial Theater. The emperor had publicly questioned him in the court about the incident at the Linen Pavilion, causing Cui Song to blush with embarrassment as the ministers pointed and whispered behind his back. I did not wish to speak with him and was about to pass by when he casually remarked, "You've been reborn, haven't you?" Hearing this, I stopped in my tracks and turned to look at him. Cui Song smiled softly. "I knew it. Your behavior is completely different from your previous life. In your previous life, you gladly agreed to marry me. Unfortunately, it wasn't until today, when I was granted my official position, that I regained my memories from my previous life." Cui Song curved one side of his lips and leaned in to ask me, "Jiang Zhitong, do you hate me so much that you want to seek revenge on me? Why bother? A day as husband and wife is worth 100 days of kindness. After all, we still have an unborn child between us. So you still remember." I shot him a glance, raised my hand, and slapped him across the face. Cui Song was hit and turned his head away. Just as he was about to retaliate, his left hand was grabbed by me. Cui Song didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed softly. "Jiang Zhiding, how come I didn't notice this in our previous life? You're so rough." His words really annoyed me. I narrowed my eyes and told him seriously, "I have an even rougher side. Do you want to try it?" After saying that, I kicked him in the groin. My blow was too hard, and he clutched his groin, kneeling on the ground. "Jiang Zhiding, you're a poisonous woman." Cui Song cried out in pain. The umbrella was thrown aside, and fine snow covered his hair and eyebrows. Cui Song was in a pitiful state, with not a trace of his earlier composed demeanor remaining. I turned to leave, but Cui Song glared at me with hatred, speaking slowly and deliberately. "Jiang Zhiding, remember this, in my previous life, I climbed to power by stepping over the corpses of your entire family. In this life, even without the Jiang family, I have the ability to rise to the highest ranks of the court." I kept walking, stepping on his hand with force before continuing past him. How ridiculous. Even after being reborn, he still sought to become a high-ranking official? If I were to do anything, I would be the one to command all officials. When I arrived at Shan Garden, the timing was perfect. I took out the paper lanterns I had brought with me and lit each one. One by one, the paper lanterns rose slowly, their light flickering in the darkness as they drifted toward the sky. There were no stars tonight, so they became twinkling stars in the night sky. I looked up at the lanterns as they danced in the air, clasped my hands together, and silently made a wish. Only my maid Shaoli and I were in the garden, but I knew that someone was hiding in the shadows. quietly watching me from behind the carved window. Shaoli asked me curiously, "Miss, what did you wish for? Is it for peace and prosperity in the Marquis of Yongbing's mansion every year?" I tapped her forehead and said, "I can't tell you. If I tell you, it won't come true." A cold wind swept across the garden, and snowflakes swirled in the air. I wrapped myself in a brocade cape with fur trim, the soft fur brushing against my chin. I tilted my head back slightly and reached out to catch a snowflake. Then I turned and smiled at Shaoli. "It's getting late. We should return to the Marquis of Yongbing's mansion." I mentioned the Marquis of Yongbing's mansion twice, so I was sure that whoever was watching from the shadows now knew who I was. I was eager to see his next move. Sure enough, the next day when my father returned home from court, he looked deeply troubled. Upon seeing me, his brows furrowed even deeper. "Ah, gee. I have something important to tell you. It's a terrible thing. Father, please speak freely. What could be so terrible?" My father's eyes reddened, and his words came out with great difficulty. "The emperor has taken a fancy to you and wants to make you his concubine." My father told me that yesterday. The emperor had a sudden urge to visit the Shin garden and happened to see me releasing paper lanterns. He took a liking to me, and after learning that I was the daughter of the Marquis of Yongping, he spoke to my father about it. I wasn't surprised. After all, I had gone there yesterday specifically to meet the emperor. In my previous life, it was a couple who went to the Shin garden. The couple was releasing paper lanterns together when the emperor happened to see them. The emperor took a fancy to the wife and forcibly took her to the palace. The husband refused to accept this and went to the palace to find his wife. But both of them were arrested and beaten to death in the Ministry of Justice. This time, I stopped the couple who wanted to go to the Shin garden and told them there were venomous snakes in the garden. Thus, the person the emperor fell for became me. Even though I knew everything clearly, I pretended to be terrified, clutching my father's sleeve urgently. "Father, what should we do? The emperor has always favored new things and discarded the old. There are many women in the harem. He will use me and then discard me. Are you going to send me into the palace to waste my life?" My father clenched his fists, furrowed his brows, and pressed his lips together. He was a loyal minister, but he was also a father who loved his daughter deeply. At that moment, he was caught between a rock and a hard place. I stood before him, not urging him to answer, but instead lowering my head to look at the embroidered tips of my shoes. Tears streaming down my face like a floodgate had opened. My father grew even more heartbroken, patting my shoulders. "Ah, gee, your father. I can't bear to send you to such a place to suffer. Let me think of a way to refuse this matter." My father locked himself in his study, but after thinking long and hard, he couldn't come up with a suitable solution. I made my father's favorite lotus flower cake with my own hands and brought it to him. "Father, I have 2 ideas. Would you like to hear them?" The cold wind blew through the curtains, making the charcoal in the stove burn even brighter. My father didn't even bother to eat the lotus root cake and hurriedly asked me, "What are the ideas?" "The first is for you to shave my hair and send me to a temple to become a nun, where I will spend the rest of my life with only a lamp and a Buddha." Upon hearing this, my father shook his head immediately. "That's not a good idea. It would ruin your life." As he looked disappointed and dejected, I revealed my second plan. "Then send me to the northern frontier immediately, so I can train in the military camp. The emperor has never favored women who wield weapons, and since I'll be in the northern frontier, he won't force me into the palace." After all that, I just wanted to go to the northern frontier and seize military power with my own hands. But if I were to propose this rashly, my father would naturally refuse. He wanted me to live an ordinary woman's life, marrying well and raising children in peace. With no other options, I had no choice but to resort to this desperate measure. My father pondered for a moment before finally making up his mind and looking at me. Ji. I will follow your wishes. Go to the northern desert to lie low for now. Once the emperor has forgotten you, you may return. My mother seemed indifferent to the fact that I had almost become a concubine in the palace. She didn't seem to care at all. And even my father thought something was wrong with her. Your mother has been acting strangely lately. She's always distracted and comes home late. I don't know what she's been up to, my father said as he bit into a hibiscus cake. I knew what my mother was doing. When I threw Bai Ling out of the Marquis's mansion, she was barely breathing. With the cold weather, she would have died within a few hours. But my mother saved her and paid a lot of money to a doctor to treat her. She also rented a courtyard and arranged for a wet nurse to take good care of her. During this time, my mother visited her every day, even in heavy snow. Even the kindest person wouldn't go to such lengths for a maid. Father, did mother only ever carry me? I poured my father a cup of tea and asked him softly. Yes. When I first met your mother in Jinling, her health was already poor. The doctor said she had difficulty conceiving and that having children would be challenging. Indeed. All these years, she only ever carried you. My father asked in surprise. Gee, why are you asking these things? I just asked because other girls have sisters and brothers to rely on. I did not immediately tell my father about my mother and Bai Ling. Empty words hold no weight. And besides, I had not yet fully understood the truth. I would only speak when I had irrefutable evidence. Last night, it snowed all night in the capital. Today, the sun suddenly came out, and the ice crystals frozen on the eaves sparkled brightly. Time was short, so my father hurriedly helped me pack my luggage, called for a carriage, and immediately sent me to the northern desert. Gee, there have been many battles in the northwest recently. Take good care of yourself. I will write to Deputy General Li and ask him to protect you. You are a woman after all, there is no need to be brave and reckless. I smiled at him and nodded, then lifted the curtain and got into the carriage. My mother did not show any signs of reluctance, but instead frowned slightly. Isn't going to the palace a good thing? If you gain the emperor's favor, our family will have prestige. You've been spoiled and are being too sentimental. Your father is really letting you get away with this. In my opinion, they should just send you to the palace directly. I didn't respond to him and only looked at my father. My father was displeased and asked her, She is our only daughter. How can you say such things? Since that maid Bai Ling was expelled from the mansion, you've been acting strangely and have become increasingly harsh toward Ji. There was little sorrow at parting, nor much time for farewells. The carriage rolled away, and I didn't hear my mother's reply. I only saw my parents' figures growing smaller and smaller until they disappeared from sight. No matter what excuse my father finds, his failure to send me to the palace will inevitably anger the emperor. The emperor will think he's not obedient enough. But there's a war in the northwest, and he's counting on my father's men to fight, so he can't afford to make a scene. But once dissatisfaction takes root, the rift between ruler and subject will grow ever wider. He'll secretly sabotage my father, and my father will harbor resentment. When a subject is pushed to the limit, who knows how loyal he'll remain? I changed into my riding gear, mounted my horse, and set off for the northern frontier at full speed. Li, the deputy general, came to meet me from a distance. Seeing that I hadn't taken a carriage, he was slightly taken aback. So Miss still remembers how to ride a horse. I thought after spending several years in the capital, you'd have forgotten such things. How could I? I used to go horseback riding and archery in the suburbs of the capital, but I'm a bit rusty now. Li, the deputy general, said the camp tents and supplies were all ready and wanted to take me to see them. At that moment, the soldiers were resting, gathered in small groups chatting. Have you heard? The Marquis sent his own daughter to the military camp for training. The sandstorms here are so fierce. How could the Marquis bear to send a young lady here? I guess she just wants to have some fun, see the world, and come back after a while, using this as a fancy excuse. Someone else lowered their voice and whispered. I heard the deputy commander specially prepared a new tent for her, with brand new bedding and utensils, and even a dressing table inside. We're short on water here, but her tent has 2 extra buckets of water, just in case the young lady needs them. We're here to suffer. But she's not. Lee, the deputy captain, heard this and snapped. Are you all too idle? Coming here to gossip? The soldiers glanced at me and quickly dispersed. For some reason, I sensed that although Lee the deputy captain appeared respectful toward me, he held me in contempt. He led me to my tent. As the soldiers had said, my tent was indeed spacious. It had a wardrobe, a dressing table, a copper mirror, and a tea table, with 2 buckets of clean water placed nearby. Lee the deputy captain explained to me, the water here isn't very clean, you won't be able to tolerate it. This is the water we drink. You can use it to wash your hands or wash your clothes. If you need more, I'll have someone fetch some. Just rest here. If you want to go anywhere or do anything, just let me know, and I'll arrange it for you. I didn't step into the tent and asked him with a half smile. Deputy General, do you think I came here to have fun? What else? Miss, you're just a delicate young lady from the inner chambers. I can't expect you to go to the battlefield and fight enemies. He said matter-of-factly. Just relax and enjoy yourself here. When you want to go home, I'll have someone escort you back. I spoke seriously to him. As long as the war between the Northwest and the Jin Kingdom continues, I will not return. Miss, don't act on impulse. The cruelty and hardship of the front lines are beyond your imagination. Deputy General Lee laughed helplessly. I didn't answer, only asking him to bring me a bowl of water that the soldiers drank from. The water was indeed a bit dirty and slightly yellowish. I drank it all in one gulp, not leaving a drop, and said calmly, I have heard that the discipline in my father's army is strict. If that is the case, there should be no special treatment for me. Whatever the soldiers drink, I will drink. Whatever they eat, wear, or use, I will use. Also, I will not stay in this camp. I pointed to the nearby tents where the female soldiers were staying. I will stay with them. Lee, the deputy captain, looked at me in astonishment and shook his head. Miss, this is inappropriate. They share a tent with 10 people. It's very crowded, and the bedboards are extremely hard. The Marquis ordered us to take good care of you. How can I do this? I glanced at him. If you're supposed to take good care of me, then do as I say. After saying that, I asked for a set of military attire and walked toward the female soldiers' quarters. Before leaving, I heard someone ask Lee, the deputy captain, should we dismantle the newly erected camp? No need, Lee replied firmly. Leave it for her. Within 3 days, she'll be crying and running back. I disappointed Deputy General Lee. I didn't run back crying. Instead, I quickly became friends with the soldiers. During morning training, he saw me running with the soldiers while carrying weights. From a distance, I heard him say to someone, in less than a quarter of an hour, the young lady will fall behind. But he didn't know that my father still kept the habit of morning training with weights. And every few days, he would drag me along to run a lap with him. I kept up with the group and still had enough energy to wave at him. Lee, the deputy commander, was quite embarrassed. At the shooting range, I fired 3 arrows simultaneously, all hitting the bullseye, silencing those who had claimed I couldn't even draw a bow. I ate and slept with all the soldiers, showing no signs of being different. The sun in the northern desert was intense, And within a few days, I was tanned to a glossy black. I heard the soldiers say, "We thought we were getting a delicate young lady, but she turned out to be a tough woman." Lee, the deputy commander, secretly dismantled the tent he had specially prepared for me. When I caught him, he scratched the back of his neck and bowed his head in embarrassment. Less than 2 months later, the Jin invaders attacked again. The troops were filled with anger, grabbing their weapons and rushing toward the battlefield. After making arrangements, Lee, the deputy commander, suddenly looked at me seriously and asked, "Miss, can you go to the battlefield?" Yes. This was the first time I had ever witnessed the brutality of war. The setting sun was as red as blood. Flames raged fiercely, and the air was filled with the nauseating stench of blood. On the battlefield, I severed the heads of enemy soldiers. The brothers and sisters I had met in the military tents were impaled by spears and pierced through the skull by arrows. Falling just a few steps away from me, my body bore 7 wounds, and my face had a new gash. But I had killed 15 people. Lieutenant Lee looked at the wounds on my face and my tattered armor and asked me, "Miss, do you now know how brutal war is? It's a life-threatening endeavor. Do you want to go home?" "I want to stay." My father taught me to ride horses and shoot arrows, to wield a spear and a sword, but he never imagined I would achieve such feats. He only hoped I would find a suitable husband and live a peaceful life in the inner courtyard. So, even though his daughter was right before his eyes, he was only thinking about investing in his future son-in-law and helping him rise to power. This is my father's limitation, and it was also the true cause of my death in my previous life. But how can a son-in-law be as reliable as a daughter? Why entrust one's life and fortune to an outsider? I can achieve great deeds on my own. I chose to stay in the northern desert to fight, which enraged my father greatly. He sent 12 letters, instructing Lee, the deputy general, not to let me go to the battlefield. Lee hesitated for a moment, then picked up his brush and wrote, "The daughter of the Marquis is stubborn, I cannot persuade her. Perhaps the Marquis should come personally to fetch her? But the Emperor has strictly forbidden my father from going to the northwest. How could he come personally?" My father was heartbroken but eventually replied, "The rebellious daughter is stubborn. Let her go. Just ensure she is spared. But swords and spears have no eyes, how can one predict such things? Iron hooves crushed bones, and spears and swords pierced through the biting cold. Bones piled up like mountains, turning into urgent reports at the relay stations. I was severely wounded, with a fever that would not subside. And I once walked through a snow-covered wasteland, leaving a trail of blood behind me." Lee, the deputy general, looked at me with a different expression. He said, "A tiger father does not have a dog daughter." I gradually became involved in military affairs, making decisions and discussing strategies with the generals. On the day we drove the Jin people back to their old territory, half of the brothers and sisters I had met when I first entered the military camp had already been killed or wounded. Those who survived cried while waving flags and shouting, tears welling up in their eyes. But before we could celebrate for long, news suddenly arrived. The Prince of Xianling in the south had rebelled while the northern campaign was underway. His forces advanced swiftly, capturing numerous cities, and were on the verge of taking Pengcheng. With no one left in the court to rely on, the emperor had no choice but to send my father to suppress the rebellion. The Prince of Xianling was the very man whom Cui Song had defected to in my previous life, the same man who had ordered the execution of the 37 members of the Jiang family. My enemy had finally emerged. I spurred my horse and rushed straight to Pengcheng to join my father. There, I encountered the long-lost Cui Song. I heard that Cui Song had become a favorite of the emperor. Although he initially only managed the imperial theater, he took the opportunity to recruit many young, beautiful actresses for the emperor, using their beauty to win his favor. In my previous life, with the help of the Jiang family, Cui Song had followed the path of a virtuous minister. climbing the ranks steadily. This time, he had become a flatterer, catering to the emperor's preferences and winning his favor. The emperor did not trust my father and, knowing of the past enmity between the Jiang family and Shui Song, had sent Shui Song to oversee the troops. When he saw me arriving from the northern deserts, Shui Song paused for a moment before bursting into laughter. Jiang Zhitong, how did you become such a disgrace? Look at your dark, shiny appearance, you don't look like a proper lady at all. Without me, how did you end up like this? Anyone would think you're a homeless beggar on the street. I gave him a cold glance, revealing my white teeth. Do you want to be beaten again? Times have changed. Shui Song wasn't afraid. He pointed to the tall, burly attendant behind him and raised his eyebrows with a smile. This is someone the emperor specially assigned to me. Husband, what are you talking about with this stranger? As they were talking, Bai Ling came from behind and draped a coat over Shui Song. It's getting cold. Don't catch a cold. In recent years, Shui Song's reputation in the capital had grown increasingly tarnished. Despite being the emperor's confidant, even aristocratic families refused to marry their daughters to him. However, some low-ranking officials, hoping to climb the social ladder, actively sought to curry favor with Shui Song. But Shui Song refused them all and instead married Bai Ling. Seeing my surprised expression, Bai Ling held her hair adorned with red hairpins, twirled the luxurious silk sleeves of her coat, and smiled coquettishly. What's the matter, Jiang girl? Surprised? My husband admires me, so of course he wants to marry me. She sighed, feigning regret. I told you earlier that my husband is a fine catch. But you wouldn't listen. Now it's too late. Once this opportunity is gone, there won't be another like it. Otherwise, you could have been as wealthy and powerful as me. Why settle for being a lowly soldier? Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were filled with venom when she looked at me. You're quite the character, treating trash like treasure. With that, I turned and left. When we met again in Pengcheng, my father was in tears, complaining about how dark I had become from the sun while constantly expressing how much he missed me. My mother, however, remained calm, as if lost in thought. I had been in the northern desert for so long, yet she hadn't sent me a single letter or even a pair of warm clothes. It was my father who patted my mother on the shoulder and reminded her, "What are you standing there for? It's been so long, don't you want to hug Aiji?" My mother finally snapped out of her daze and gave me a half-hearted hug. Just once. Then she let go quickly, as if I were a hot potato. My father saw this but said nothing. My mother is a woman who doesn't like to move around. Normally, she wouldn't follow my father on his military campaigns. This time, she insisted on coming with me. She said that suppressing the rebellion was dangerous, and she wouldn't feel at ease unless she was by my side. That night, after my father had fallen asleep, I saw my mother sneak out of the room. On the other side, Bai Ling also slipped out of the house under the cover of darkness. Both were very cautious. Meeting in a quiet, deserted place, Bai Ling threw herself into my mother's arms, pleading with her. My mother's face softened with a rare expression of tenderness. She ruffled Bai Ling's hair and held her close. When she saw me, she didn't say a word. But when she saw Bai Ling, she seemed to have endless things to say. After 2 incense sticks had burned, she reluctantly let Bai Ling go, carefully fastening her cloak before she left. Pengcheng was easy to defend but difficult to attack. Once captured, the rebel forces would march straight to the capital. In my previous life, it was in Pengcheng that Shui Song tricked my father into drinking a sleeping potion, then opened the city gates to let Xianling Wang enter. This time, he pretends to be the emperor's confidant, but secretly continues to communicate with Xianling Wang. He wants to follow the same path as before. But my father, alerted by me, is highly vigilant and refuses to eat anything that has passed through his hands. Chui Song wasn't in a hurry. He smiled at me and said, Jiang Xiding, you died too early in my previous life and didn't see the fate of the Jiang family. Would you like me to tell you about it? I didn't even glance at him. Chui Song knew I wasn't curious. But he still insisted on pestering me. Speaking slowly, you don't know how tragic it was. Heads rolled everywhere, each with eyes wide open, and the blood had stained the cracks in the floor tiles red. Jiang Xiding, what are you doing? My mother's voice suddenly came from behind me. She hurriedly pulled me aside and scolded. That's Bai Ling's husband, not yours. Why are you bothering him? She scolded me without hearing my side of the story, accusing me of trying to seduce another man. My father was standing nearby, about to reprimand her, but after exchanging a glance with me, he turned away with a cold expression. Lately, my father had fought several battles against the Prince of Xianling, who was no match for him and retreated 100 miles. The soldiers' morale was high, and they returned to Pengcheng that night to celebrate. My mother praised my father for his bravery and courage. Suddenly, she did something out of the ordinary. She personally washed her hands and cooked a soup to reward my father. As far as I can remember, my mother had never cooked before. Today, she brought up 3 plates of food. 1 plate of stir-fried mushrooms, 1 plate of braised beef, and a bowl of tomato and egg drop soup. My father blushed with joy, picked up a piece of meat, and praised my mother's cooking skills. During this time, my mother went out to wash her hands. When she returned, she found that only 2 pieces of mushroom were left on the plate of stir-fried mushrooms. Mother, this dish is delicious. I pointed to the plate of stir-fried mushrooms. Yes. It's been a long time since I've tasted something so fresh. My father smiled and said, after being married for so long, you've always said you couldn't cook, and I believed you. Today I finally realize how good your cooking is. He pointed to the 2 pieces of mushrooms. I didn't dare to finish them, so I saved 2 pieces for you. You should eat them too. My mother didn't touch her chopsticks. Just drinking the soup. I don't really like mushrooms. Soon after the meal, my father felt dizzy and collapsed on the bed, unable to get up. When I returned to my room, my legs felt weak, and I leaned against my mother. She tried to keep her distance from me, pushed me back into the room, and hurriedly closed the door. My mother walked to the city gate, hiding in a corner without showing herself. The stars disappeared from the sky, leaving only a crescent moon. Later, the sky began to lighten, and the crescent moon was swallowed by the misty mountains. A pigeon flew over the city wall but did not enter the city, turning a corner and flying away. At that moment, my mother pulled out my father's token from her bosom. The Marquis has ordered you to open the city gates immediately. The gate commander was stunned, rubbed his eyes, and looked carefully. It was indeed my father's token. But why would the Marquis order us to open the city gates? Someone objected. Isn't this letting the enemy in? My mother grew angry and prepared to open the gates herself. But she lacked the strength. So she turned around and coldly asked the soldiers, "Don't you know who I am? Hurry up and help me." She held the token and threatened them with military orders. The soldiers had no choice but to help her open the gates. As the gates swung open, Chui Song, who had not been seen all night, appeared at the end of the official road, accompanied by the Xianling prince on a fine horse, followed by a large crowd of rebel soldiers. My mother stood at the city gate, welcoming the Xianling prince and the rebels into the city. Crows cawed from the city walls as the rebels poured into the city. After entering the city, Xianling Wang sat upright on his horse. Lowering his head to look at my mother and Chui Song, we were able to capture the city without losing a single soldier today. This is all thanks to you. Chui Song, dressed in a blue brocade robe, smiled gracefully. It is my honor to serve the prince. My mother spoke meekly. Please spare us from poverty and grant us wealth and honor once your mission is accomplished. Xianling Wang's gaze fell on my mother with a hint of interest. Where is the Marquis of Yongping? Has he not awakened yet? Yesterday, he and Jiang Zhitong ate an entire plate of stir-fried mushrooms. He is still sleeping in his room. She pointed to the closed door ahead. He is inside. The Prince of Xianling glanced at Cui Song, who understood and immediately sent someone to arrest my father. Your Highness, I have another favor to ask, Cui Song said suddenly. The Prince of Xianling raised his eyebrows. What is it? The Marquis of Yongping's daughter, Jiang Ziding, was once betrothed to me. But unfortunately, she despised my family's decline and refused to marry me. This woman is spoiled and rude. If she is released, she will be a menace to society. Why not let me discipline her? I will break her limbs and clip her wings, so that she will beg for death but cannot die. Cui Song spoke calmly, his words sending shivers down my spine. But my mother did not say a word. Xianling Wang said indifferently, Then I will leave her to you. Her life is in your hands. He was ruthless and cruel, often killing people on a whim, so it was no surprise that he agreed. Just then, the door was kicked open and the rebels went in to look for someone. Before long, they came out with their tails between their legs. The Marquis of Yongping isn't in there. How can that be? My mother was stunned. Could he have gone to Jiang Ziding's house? She didn't bother with propriety, pointing at my room and ordering them to break in, and Jiang Zhitong is staying there. But the room was empty. Xianling Wang finally noticed something was amiss and asked in surprise, Why are there no civilians in the city? Cui Song paused for a moment. Perhaps they're all hiding at home to avoid the chaos. But where are the patrol soldiers? Xianling Wang frowned. They searched everywhere but didn't see a single person. Could it be an empty city? Just then, rebel soldiers rushed in with news. Your Highness, someone has blocked the city gates from the outside and climbed onto the city walls. Xianling Wang and the others turned pale and hurried toward the city walls. By the time they arrived, the walls of Pengcheng were already swarming with soldiers. Archers had set up their crossbows, and spearmen had loaded their projectiles, aiming them at the base of the city walls. My father and I stood atop the city walls, our eyes clear and alert, showing no signs of intoxication. My mother looked up, her face as pale as paper. How did you end up here? You didn't eat any mushrooms yesterday. Were you and Jiang Zhitong putting on a show for me? She finally reacted. You can put on a show, but I can't accompany you and Ji to act with you? My father's eyes were filled with disappointment. Suddenly, a thunderclap rang out from above the city tower, and the crows flapped their wings in panic and flew around wildly. My mother staggered, shocked. You know everything? Know what? Do you know that you had a child before marrying me? I went to great lengths to have someone investigate my mother's past in Jinling. She was the daughter of the Gu family, a merchant family in Jinling. While she was still unmarried, she had an affair with a guard in the mansion and became pregnant. When the guard discovered she was pregnant, he fled immediately. Later, as her pregnancy progressed, my mother's condition became evident, and the matter was discovered by my maternal grandfather. He ordered her to abort the child, but she refused, insisting that the guard would return to find her. She risked her life to give birth to this child. However, the guard never returned, and the clan refused to accept the daughter born out of wedlock. After a brief meeting with my mother, they abandoned the child. My mother remembered that her biological daughter had a petal-shaped blue birthmark on her arm and a circular red mark on her shoulder blade. That day was bitterly cold, and she believed her daughter had perished. She remained in her room, her heart broken, obeying the family's arrangements. It was also during this childbirth that she suffered injuries that left her unable to conceive again. Later, Under the family's arrangements, she met and fell in love with my father, concealing that painful past, and married him as planned. And the girl I nearly killed, Bai Ling, was the first child she gave birth to. Ever since my mother saved Bai Ling's life from me that day, she has recognized Bai Ling as her daughter. Despite my mother's repeated warnings not to tell anyone about this, Bai Ling told Chui Song every detail after her injuries healed. Chui Song used this to manipulate my mother and make her his informant in a marquis's mansion. Bai Ling pleaded with her repeatedly, saying that her entire happiness in life depended on Chui Song, and begged my mother to assist him. My mother, who had lost and then regained this daughter, loved her dearly and gradually betrayed my father, aligning herself with Chui Song. Gu Mingyu, haven't I been good enough to you? After marrying you, I had no concubines or mistresses, and you managed all the affairs of the mansion. Even so, you're still not satisfied? My mother looked up at my father and laughed softly. You're not the love of my life. How can I be happy by your side? My father was stunned. But you were the one who confessed your feelings to me first. That was just a ploy by the Gu family to get into the marquis's mansion, my mother said with her eyes downcast and a faint tone. She seemed to remember something and suddenly changed the subject, speaking urgently. Speaking of which, where is Bai Ling? Where has Bai Ling gone? I brought Bai Ling, whose limbs were bound. Before her, are you looking for her? Clouds surged like waves, and the sky grew increasingly gloomy. A city gate separated me from my mother. I asked her. I'll send her to you. Okay? What do you mean? I smiled softly, then gently pushed her away. Bai Ling's screams echoed through the air. In front of the army, she was pushed off the city wall by me. A dull thud followed, and blood spattered everywhere. Bai Ling's almond-shaped eyes stared wide open as she fell lifelessly at my mother's feet. My mother was momentarily dazed, then screamed shrilly, covering her face and collapsing to the ground. Jiang Zhitong, she's your own sister. How dare you? What's there to be afraid of? I said disdainfully. She's tried to kill me time and again. I've already shown mercy by letting her live this long. The emperor is incompetent and has a close relationship with Prince Xianling. Even if the evidence is presented before him, he likely won't believe that Prince Xianling is plotting a rebellion. He will only think that my father is trying to drive a wedge between him and Prince Xianling. Therefore, knowing that Chui Song had defected to Prince Xianling, my father and I decided to use his plan against him. We sent the people of Pengcheng away in advance, buried bows and arrows and ammunition in the city towers, pretended to let Prince Xianling into the city, and then closed the city gates to trap him. Seeing himself trapped in the city, Prince Xianling suddenly jumped off his horse, held down my mother, who was going crazy, and held a long knife to her neck. Marquis of Yongping, if you dare to let anyone shoot, I'll kill your wife. My mother was his last bargaining chip. But my mother, who was being held hostage, showed no concern for her own life. Instead, she glared at me with hatred and shouted, Jiang Zhitong, why don't you just die? Why don't you go and be buried with my daughter? You little bitch. You are so evil. You deserve to go to hell. I'll kill you. Before she could finish, she was covered by the Marquis of Xianling. Chui Song's face was as white as paper, but he tried his best to remain calm. It's okay. Everyone says that the Marquis of Yongping loves his wife dearly. He will definitely save her. But my father stood with his hands behind his back, shouting at the rebels. I know you are all forced to follow the rebels out of desperation. If you are willing to reform and kill Xianling Wang today, I will spare his life. Xianling Wang looked up in terror and locked eyes with my father. The soldiers, knowing their time was up, fell silent. Then, one of them suddenly shouted and charged forward with his sword, striking at Xianling Wang. He failed to kill Shuangwen and was instead kicked flying. But next, one by one, the rebel swords and spears turned toward their leader. Shuangwen couldn't dodge in time and used my mother as a human shield. Heavy rain poured down, dividing the world into blurry fragments. Crows returned to their nests, their cries hoarse. My mother was covered in wounds and was finally killed with a sword to the throat. As she fell, my father turned away, his eyes finally filled with tears. Shuangwen's army fell into chaos, with those protecting him and those wanting to kill him fighting each other. Chui Song was forgotten. He fled in panic, trying to hide. I narrowed my eyes, drew my bow, aimed at him, and released the arrow. 10 arrows were fired in rapid succession. The first arrow struck his left knee. His knee gave way, and he fell to the ground. The second arrow struck his right knee, and he knelt in agony, unable to rise. The remaining arrows struck his arms, palms, back, shoulders, eyes, and forehead. I had deliberately poisoned the arrowheads. Chui Song bled from all 7 orifices, clutching his chest in agony as he gazed toward me. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but a mouthful of blood spurted out, and he ultimately said nothing. The poison would take effect slowly and not kill him immediately. The scene was too chaotic. He lay on the ground, watching helplessly as people stepped on his limbs, trampled his body, and left a trail of dirty footprints on his blood-stained robe, crushing the proud backbone of the scholar he once boasted of into pieces. Over there, the head of Shuangwen was severed, and a crowd rushed forward to loot it, some even cutting off his limbs to claim credit. As Chui Song was about to draw his last breath, I gave him a cold smile and drew my arrow once more. This time, it struck him square in the forehead. Then I took his body and fed it to the wild dogs, letting them feast on his remains. The battle was won easily, the soldiers had no chance to fight, and the large supply of arrows and ammunition prepared in advance went unused. The rain gradually subsided, and the sky cleared. My enemies from my previous life had finally met their end. But I did not return to the capital with my father. I carried him on my back and secretly went to the northern desert. The internal rebellion was suppressed, the Jin invaders driven out, and the emperor believed everything was under control. He had recently taken a new concubine from Jiangnan, who desired a large courtyard with southern-style gardens. The emperor ordered extensive construction, forcibly conscripting civilians to build the gardens. I wrote to my father, "Should we rebel?" My father replied, "Rebellious daughter, keep your mouth shut." 2 months later, the emperor had a new favorite courtier. This courtier was bold enough to use the emperor's favor to publicly humiliate my father, claiming that he was destined to be childless and widowed. I wrote to my father, "Should we rebel?" My father replied, "Rebellious daughter, give your father time to think." 3 months later, at the advice of his confidant, the emperor imposed severe punishments. The scholars of Lushan Academy, who spoke out boldly, were the first to be targeted. 327 of them were arrested and sentenced to execution. I wrote to my father, "Should we rebel?" This time, without waiting for his reply, I led the Embroidery army in rebellion. Under the pretext of purging the court of traitors, we marched straight to the capital. The exchange of letters took too long, and I feared that by the time my father replied, the scholars of Lushan Academy would all be executed. As we neared the capital, I received my father's reply. "Aji, come." My father and I coordinated our efforts, infiltrating the palace just as the emperor was surrounded by 6 beauties. 1 was feeding him wine, 2 were massaging his back, and 3 were dancing. I sent him to an early death with a cup of poisoned wine, and the Embroidery army entered with the imperial robe already prepared. Li, the deputy general, looked at me, then at my father, and for a moment didn't know whom to give the imperial robe to. I closed the door and discussed with my father. Father, you are old and should not be burdened with such matters. Let Aji send you off to enjoy a life of leisure. Shall we? My father was startled and took a step back. Are you trying to kill your father? No. That's not what I meant. I shook my head repeatedly. What I mean is, I will be the emperor, and you will be the retired emperor. How about that? After a long silence, my father looked at his frosted temples in the bronze mirror and nodded very slowly. All right. Since the Battle of Pengcheng, after my mother's death, my father had aged greatly, and his fighting spirit had been nearly worn away. I knew he would agree to my proposal. Thus, the one who donned the yellow robe became me. The great Yin dynasty fell, and I established a new dynasty, ascending the throne as empress. After becoming empress, life became tedious and boring. My father, the retired emperor, lived a leisurely life, spending his free time fishing. He also liked to take me fishing with him, saying it was to cultivate my character. One day, my white-haired father, holding his fishing rod, suddenly remarked to me, "Ah, gee, I was actually afraid you wouldn't make a good emperor. I never expected you to do so well. Like how you thought I couldn't go to battle and had Li Fu secretly protect me." I smiled and asked him in return. My father paused, lost in distant memories, not even noticing the fish biting the line. The gruesome scene of the 37 heads of the Jiang family falling to the ground was still fresh in his mind when he suddenly heard the voice of the maid Bai Ling. Upon hearing this, my father's old face flushed red, and he felt a bit ashamed. I was bathed in sunlight, and I too recalled the past. I too once had a heart full of ambition, aiming for Kunlun, shooting an arrow to pierce the clouds, and drawing my bow to startle the thunder. But later I realized that if one wishes to revive a decaying nation and save the suffering people, the way of war can only be a secondary means. Stability lies in the halls of power, in the hands of the ruler. What of a woman's fate? The world says the path is difficult, but I choose the difficult path toward the heights. Even as a woman, I can have a heart full of passion, cross rivers and seas, climb mountains, and chase the heavens and earth. Ah, gee, what are you standing there for? Quickly reel in the line. My father suddenly reminded me. I looked down and saw ripples spreading across the lake surface. The fishing rod trembled. My fish had taken the bait. And,